Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome to a new reaction. This is The Night is Not a Night, a Deltarune character design analysis. And while I did initially see this in just my YouTube suggestion feed, it was suggested to me not very long after on my Discord server. So technically, this was suggested to me by Lunar Cherry, and I mean, honestly, like, I saw this and just, if you've watched my channel for, any length of time, you should know that, the things that I react to the most often are, Deltarune related content. And the vast majority of that is, theories and, stuff like that. Yeah, mainly because, it's what people watch. But when I saw this, a character design analysis, honestly, that intrigued me, mostly because, like, Deltarune's art style. It's pixel art, with, the vast majority of characters not having that high of a resolution. So doing an actual analysis of the character design, especially of the Knight, who, like, if memory serves, only has literally two colors in their sprite, and they are black and white. Saying that and also on top of that, saying that the Knight isn't a Knight or doesn't look like a Knight. I mean, granted, I've said before, the whole idea that, that the Knight is very freaky. I mean, like, I've said before that my favorite interpretation of the Knight's armor is very, like, Venom symbiote-esque. Especially with the whole thing that, that just with, like, how the body is shaped, looks very skeletal and very, like, thin. And, like, then there's the whole thing where, like, when it roars, its chest opens up in ribs, and its helmet, like, when you first see it in Chapter 3, it's like, it's hunched over, and there's, like, drool or something coming out of the helmet, like, which the visor may, in fact, actually be a mouth. It's, like, it is honestly, like, it's a very weird design, and it's a really cool design, and, like, honestly, it's if it wasn't for the fact that I'm very certain we'll never get, like, a high resolution version of it, at least in game. That's my only complaint with, Deltarune's art style. So again, honestly, so this video was made by ya boy Aleric. I'd never seen any of their videos before, and honestly, this honestly very intrigues me, so I definitely want to get into it. So yeah, we should probably get this thing started. So yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video lead to my Let's Play of the day, and if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because almost 3/4 of the people that watch my channel aren't subscribed, and I'd very much like that to change, because my next big goal is hopefully at 6,000 subscribers before the end of the year. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Begone! We have found fresh purpose, for the night has appeared. The night that pulls the fountains from the earth. Holy fountains, whose shadows are creating a new world. Our world.
God, that, honestly, we're getting into, like, analog horror series level designs there. Wow, that is honestly a really creepy design for King. Wow, okay. Spoiler, self-harm, and religious trauma. Oh, okay.
The Night is not a Knight. Because the last time I checked, Knights don't typically transform into birds and fly at Mach speeds. Hi, Aleric here, and welcome back to another Undertale design breakdown video. Woohoo, yeah, woo. I know, people, relax! Hey, relax, get off me! Today, we're going to be tearing apart the visual design elements that make the Knight an absolutely ingenious design. We touched on it a little bit in our last design breakdown of Susie and Chris, but quite frankly, there's just too much to talk about, and
Honestly, wait a second. Wait. Oh, well, will you see what was also requested? Ah, okay, I might have to watch that after this one.
I may or may not have said that, you know, I could make 12 videos on the night, so maybe I'll make a few. I don't know if I'll actually make 12. I probably won't make 12. That sounds like a lot, actually. That might have been a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't know. We'll see. Check back with me at the end of the year. Oh, and the video on Rousey and Noelle and Birdley, it's still happening. It's just taking a long time.
Okay.
The video's gonna be like 40 minutes. Fuck! Part 1! Color theory.
Or lack thereof, yeah.
For some reason, I feel like this section is gonna be really short.
God, honestly, again, it's the whole thing. I said before, you know, my preferred, like, thought process on the night is that, you know, the armor is, like, symbiote-esque. But again, like, it very much... Again, like, the holes, like, the stigmata in the hands, it's, like, all very Gaster-like. I talked about it before, and, like, my own personal theory that I and other people agree with, that I and other people, you know, think of, is the fact that, you know, like, oh, the night is Death, but it's only a part of Death. And, like, the fact that there's so much, like... There's, like, so much design in the night that's, like, very skeletal and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with my theory.
If you've ever studied visual art before, you've definitely heard of the concept of negative space. The concept of negative space is a rather simple one to understand. It's the empty space around and between the subject in your piece.
Yeah,
a
I've heard
lack
that
of
before.
understanding of negative space is often a beginner artist's trap. The desire to fill every single component of the frame with elements creates very busy, unreadable images where you're like, I don't know where my eye's supposed to go. Am I supposed to look at the guy in the front? Am I supposed to look at the background? What am I looking at? And I think there's no greater example of this principle than in the paintings of Dragon Bibin. Bibin's most famous painting illustrates the power of negative space perfectly. In Deimos, we see a dog looking into the darkness of an
Deimos
open
version
door,
1
a
and 2.
room that clearly has something inside of it as the dog stands ready, staring straight ahead. But we, as the viewer of the painting, can't see anything. It is just black. Similarly, the walls and floor have nothing going on. There's no additional texture outside of a little bit of corrosion to give you any indication of what's going on here. The empty space of the painting allows your imagination to fill in the gaps. The negative space is telling the story of some unknown threat.
I'm sorry, wait, is this one? Are these like 3 different paintings, or is this one painting? Because, like, so we got, like, you know, bedsheet going out into the blackness of the void. Window full of zebras. Oh, wait, is this actually... Wait, no, is this actually 4 paintings? Wait, yeah, so we got window of zebras, chicken flying at the wall, and then we have just dog on, like, the only part of the ground that's not covered in snow. Okay.
Watching. But negative space doesn't just apply to composition. Negative space applies to every facet of art, not only in the visual arts, but in other mediums. When it comes to the general color theory of Deltarune, the game is very bright, saturated, and vibrant, but the night acts as negative space.
Yeah,
the night
literally
does not have a color palette, it is black and white. Every other character in Deltarune, ally and villain alike, is colorful and bright. The so-called Dark World isn't really that dark at all. As a matter of fact, it's more saturated in its color palette than the so-called Light World. The only beings, aside from the night, that are purely black and white are literal men made of shadows. So why is the night being black and white so important? It signifies complete separation from every other character in the story. The night does not seem to have traditional ties and bonds. The only relationship we see the night visually on screen have with another person is with Chris. But even then, we can hardly call that relationship high quality or good. While the knight clearly possesses character and personality, they act so far beyond and outside of the boundaries that every other character functions under that they are functionally a different species. They are significantly closer to the Titan and the Spawn that they summon through the Roaring than they are close to any other living character, which we'll come back to later. In our last character design breakdown video, which you'll most definitely like because, I mean, come on, you're 5 minutes into this video, so, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that one later.
Like and subscribe now for more Oh, no! Stop! Get off me! My arm! Ah! I talked about how the simplicity of Deltarune's designs is the secret, is the strength that makes them so effective. The knight follows suit by transcending the design philosophy of every other character by removing color entirely rather than by having their color palette be meaningful and deep. Part 2: Shape Language. Like most character designs in Deltarune, the shape language of the knight follows the classic principle around circles, squares, and triangles. Shape language is the concept of using basic shapes to create specific characterization just by looking at a design. Let's say I were to draw a dog, and the 3 times I drew the dog, I primarily focused on creating circular, round shapes, then square solid shapes, and then triangular sharp shapes. If I showed you those 3 images of dogs at the end, you would have a particular idea of what kind of character that dog would have purely based off of the shape language. The knight follows this principle and follows it extremely harshly.
Yeah, it ends in nothing but points. It's sharp, dangerous. But also, like, I only just noticed here that it's pointed out, but like all the limbs, it's all like quote unquote smooth, like, and curved limbs that still end in sharp, jagged points. I'd never really like thought of that before.
There is not a single part of the knight's design that is not sharp. Even the perfectly rounded eye that lies within the knight's chest when it opens up its toothy rib cage to reveal its guts possesses a sharp, dagger-like pupil. So what do people typically associate sharp and triangular shape language with?
Evil.
Let me read off these characteristics. Dynamic, dangerous, and unpredictable.
Yeah, that kind of fits the knight.
I think that checks out. Yeah. A key element of designing a character through the lens of triangular shape language is that you can't have too many points on it, otherwise your eye doesn't know where to follow. While the knight is extremely razor sharp, all of the actual points on the design are literally focal points. The top of the helmet, the points of the shoulders, the points at the end of its lack of feet, the points on its pelvis, the horns. Horns? Wait a minute.
Antlers.
You know who else has horns? Dude, get the fuck out of here. How did you get in my house again? Dude.
Why is it always Muscle Man? Why is Muscle Man the weird, creepy one?
Take my
Get over!
Oh no!
I'm sorry. I don't know how this keeps happening. I'm just... Anyway. This shape language principle even extends to the knight's attacks. In a game where most attacks are nonsensical, avant-garde, and kind of weird bullshit, the knight's attacks are straightforward sword slashes. And when the knight is not using their sword, they're using shapes like teeth and sharp snow crystals. There is no fun or whimsy to these attacks. This is not a checkers piece with giant thick thighs jumping on you. This is not a TV throwing a ball at you that you have to block with an umbrella. This is a creature with a sharp blade trying to slice your neck open. And as we see with Susie and Rousey, there is no reasoning with this thing. It is kill or be killed. The exact philosophy that we hear at the start of Undertale that is slowly proven wrong over the course of the pacifist route.
You know, I had never honestly thought of the knight being Flowey before, but now honestly that thought terrifies me. Again, the whole, like, it just, I mean, I'm backtracking here a little bit, but the whole, like, separation, like, it being more closely related to the Titans rather than anything in the actual Dark World itself. I mean, we saw what happened when, you know, you actually create a Titan. Like, its egg or whatever it is like a stone pillar. Like, they're more forces of nature than they are, like, Darkners. I mean, Darkners, as Rousey has already said, aren't really alive. They're very much more imagination than anything else. But, like, seemingly Titans and the Knight, by extension, just by similar design, are, like, they're not really there. There's nothing to communicate with. Which, again, going back to the whole Death theory, it's only a part of Death, and it's a part of Death that's been, like, possessed. And then, like, the actual, like, rest of her is, like, hidden away in the code or whatever.
Coming back yet again many years later in the form of the greatest rug pull boss ever. It's no mistake that the Knight is framed extremely similarly to Azrael in the final battle from Undertale when they commit their final attack. The Knight parallels Azrael in both philosophy and framing, so that we as the player know that the Knight is indeed worthy of being a final threat. And before anyone says, roaring fraud, a cutscene Knight, get out of here. Even when you do beat the Roaring Knight, you still haven't gotten their health bar all the way down. They are still holding back. They still one-shot the whole team. Stop playing. As we see from Chris getting knighted, it was clearly a test to see if Chris was worthy. And you know what? Let me stop. I'm getting heated up. I don't need this.
Yeah, I mean, and on top of all that, just from, like, you know, a storytelling or, you know, gameplay, you know, like, perspective, it's a mid-game fight. I mean, you know we're gonna fight the Knight again. I mean, even just in Chapter 4, you're running into them multiple times, but it's because, you know, we're controlling Chris specifically that you know, that things kind of get thrown off.
Stress creates negative acetaminophen or whatever. Gah. The important takeaway is this. The Knight being sharp has a point to it. Huh? Yeah, baby. Roll the next chapter of the video. Chapter 3. Characterization through design elements. Okay, we've talked the general concepts, the color theory, the shape language. Let's talk about the specific elements of the design that make the Knight unique and stand out. As I hinted at before, the first major design element to give us any inclination as to what or who the Knight might be is the horns. Now, obviously, the Holiday family are the only ones that possess horns like this at all in the main town of Deltarune. It's a dead giveaway that the Knight comes from the Holiday family or has some sort of deep connection to it, which is then confirmed in Chapter 4, when we see that over the phone, Carol Holiday has communications with the Knight, knows about the Dark Fountains. To what degree, we don't know, but they're clearly working together. Tie this together with the fact that Carol Holiday has a giant sword hanging in the kitchen, as well as a hidden sword in the room where we can see Asgore from the vents that seems to be a black katana, similarly to the black knife the Roaring Knight wields, and the collaboration is guaranteed. The question is, what is the nature of that collaboration? Who or what the Knight is gets further complicated when we get a look at their palms. The Knight possesses holes in their hands just like
Yes. Because it's always Gaster. It always comes back to Gaster. And honestly, I hope it eventually does actually reach Gaster officially, because I'm honestly a little tired of him being just constantly teased for all these years.
Undertale's Boogeyman back at it again. Look, I'm not going to go into the whole history of Gaster and how Gaster's related to the Knight and how Gaster is the narrator of Deltarune or has control over Deltarune or might be the god of Deltarune. All of that is better explained by theorist videos that already exist. But I will frame that Gaster has a lot of connections to death and religion. Gaster frames the Deltarune as being his creation. And the Deltarune is a religious symbol, religious iconography that everyone in Hometown follows. This frame...
Which, also thinking about it, something I only just realized, like, it's a little weird in context. At the end of chapter 4, Gaster calls us his Deltarune. And the Deltarune is very much Hometown's religion, like whatever their actually religion is called, but it's very much their equivalent of, like the cross from Christianity, given that for everything we've seen, there's, you know, a lot of, like, parallels you can draw between, like, just from a stylistic point of view. So that would be very much like if somebody was, like, making a video game based in our world, and they called, like, the player playing their game my cross or my crucifix. Like, in context, that's a little weird.
Gaster as the creator of everything in the Deltarune universe, as well as being some sort of entity around death. For the Knight to have those same holes in their hands represent...
Also, wait a second. Hands down, kind of knee up. I just realized, didn't Metaton have, like, a pose similar to the Knight in this one shot? Like, at some point during during their boss battle or something like that? Am I just misremembering things?
Some tie to death or to the greater religious mystery of Deltarune. The open hole wounds in the hands also parallel real-world religion and history, primarily the history of the stigmata. Stigmata are scars and wounds that parallel the wounds of Jesus Christ when he was crucified. The earliest recorded stigmatist was Saint Francis of Assisi. The legend goes that Saint Francis was in prayer when a six-winged angel came forth to him crucified. And when Francis's prayer was done, he found his hands and feet had nails in them, much like Christ himself. Those who knew St. Francis after this event reported seeing the holes in his hands as he went through the rest of his life, and in his casket when he was buried. From then on, the stigmata became an example of extreme worship within the Christian religion. To give oneself the stigmata was to show devotion to Christ above all. But there are two very important pieces of historical context to the stigmata as it relates to Gaster and to the story of Deltarune. The first is that despite the most famous stigmatics being men, the vast majority of them were women. Women who were often deeply berated and criticized for attempting to be closer to Christ in that manner. This could be a sign that the hidden identity behind the Knight is a feminine visage, one whose devotion to a higher power has kept her trapped in the dark.
Okay, I mean, obviously, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. So, I mean, just more proof that the Knight could either be Des or, you know, Carol. But having it be like symbolic of like being close to a higher power. Oh, that's good. I mean, like I already knew that, you know, stigmata was a thing in the Catholic Church and stuff like that. But I didn't know it was specifically connected to being being extremely pious or something like that. Huh. Interesting.
Or one who was punished with the stigmata, as many women in nunneries were. The other element of the stigmata that really matters in relationship to Deltarune is the psychological element. Many modern-day psychologists posit that stigmata as a phenomenon within the Christian community was actually an expression of psychological maladies. Stigmata is psychologically very similar to exorcisms, where the majority of these cases were actually just deep psychological issues or physiological issues that were not properly addressed. A great number of these women historically likely had autism, epilepsy, dissociative identity disorder. When looking at stigmata through a historical and scientific lens, it starts to look a lot less like religious devotion and a lot more like psychological issues going unanswered, self-harm on a mass scale. So what does this have to do with a game that features the original Star Walker?
Man, talk about that. Man, that's a transition and a half. And I was like, what is that? What is that animation from?
I think Gaster and the Knight are meant to represent the concept of a false stigmata. Continuous, open wounds born not from some sort of devotion to a higher power, but from deep-seated familial and psychological trauma left unanswered. Similarly to how we talked about Chris not being able to remember what is behind the tree, the Knight seems to have gone through some sort of event that intrinsically ties them to Gaster, that ties them to the dark underbelly of the world and to this so-called false god that wants to control everything, that believes that the Deltarune, that this world is his. And I think the intention behind having all of these visual parallels to Christian mythology is to elicit reflection on the part of the player. How much of the prophecy of this religion, of this mythology, is real, and how much of it is the influence and choices of the individuals who are a part of it? How much of Deltarune is a grand fantasy about the chosen ones, hand-picked by some deity beyond our comprehension, and how much of it is about the individual figuring out their own identity, their own place in this world, whether that be their gender identity, their sexuality, or something far, far deeper, their inherent purpose as a living being.
I mean, I watched a lot of videos talking about, whether about the prophecy and stuff like that. Whether like, oh, was the prophecy real? What did Gaster create it? Or did Gaster simply go to a universe where the prophecy was already happening and like is trying to subvert it as like a science experiment or something like that? And like, again, like it's still like so far up in the air. Like we don't really even know whether like the prophecy, like, did Gaster like actually create it, or did he just sort of like, did he see a world where the prophecy was going to happen and this try to help? Is he like, or is he being more analytical and just seeing what's happening, like when you start changing variables?
While religion, or in Deltarune's case, the prophecy, can give some people hope to cling on to and purpose, for others, it acts as a shackle, a means by which they are controlled, by which their identity is snuffed out and made smaller. To break beyond that, to be able to choose your own path in life, is, at least at this point in Chapter 4, the core conceit of Deltarune's story. The Knight possessing the stigmata is representative of this core conflict between the individual, between choosing your own path in life and greater destiny, the idea of some larger fate than you, pushing you forward. A path that you cannot choose to walk away from. It is the conflict between whether or not your choices...
Actually, just something else, like, just kind of related to the, the whole, like, similarities and connections to like, Christianity and stuff like that. I only just noticed it here, but if you look at the Knight, like, the way that the black and white is used here on their hips, like, especially with the white parts right here, doesn't that almost look like an upside down cross, like a Saint? Is it Saint Peter's cross, or what is that called? Cross of Saint Peter. Yeah, okay. And like, I'm not an expert. I do know that while it is like an actual thing, it's a symbol. It's an actual symbol, but like, it's oftentimes like connected to like the Antichrist or or stuff like that. So the whole thing with like with Gaster, that might be a connection there also, even if it is not 100% intentional or anything.
Is the conflict between whether or not your choices matter. And if you heard that entire ramble just now and you thought to yourself, it's not that deep, bro, you're wrong. It's always that deep.
It's Deltarune. Literally everything is that deep. It's like it's not like a pool where it progressively gets deeper as you go. No, it's like one of those like high diving pools, or like one of those tanks where you go in to test like pressure underwater. It's just like, it's a small thing, but it just goes endlessly deep. It's like as far as down as you go.
Okay. Last part of the design we're going to talk about. I promise. And it's way more upbeat than the history of Christian self-harm. The knight is a corpse!
Yeah.
Alright, well, maybe they're not a corpse, but they are
lot of corpse
definitely
imagery.
not giving alive. There are a few key elements as to why. First things first, that pelvic bone. In the knight's close-up sprite where they've got their hands open, you know the one where they're doing the JoJo-ass Frieza pose. We can see that there are a couple pixels between the upper body and the pelvic part of the knight that seem to indicate the shape of a pelvic bone. Add on to this that when they perform their titular roar, that their chest opens up into a toothy rib cage, and their head becomes the same shape as a deer skull. The simpler that a design is, the more that each of the individual major choices that are made within it stand out. And the fact that every major choice inside of the knight's design revolves around dead bodies, corpses, or skeletons makes it abundantly clear that the knight is, at bare minimum, closely connected to death. Some have even...
Oh, exactly why I'd rather knight. Oh, that is just an awesome design right there. I love that.
even used this to argue that the knight is papyrus. But no, I really think that is not going to happen at all.
Yeah.
And if it does happen, I am literally going to wallow in my own filth on the floor for weeks. Weeks, I'm telling you. The main reason I don't think it'll be papyrus is because papyrus isn't a deer, and when the knight roars, it becomes a deer skull, not a human skull. As funny as it would be to subvert everyone's expectations and have papyrus be the knight, I don't think it fits the darker, grittier tone that Deltarune is taking. All of the...
Unless, the whole idea that I saw floating around for a while was that, the fact that we haven't seen papyrus, at all so far, Deltarune. The fact that he's constantly staying in the house and stuff like that. Unless it turns out that, this version of papyrus, Deltarune papyrus, is just extremely depressed, at all times. And that would suck, but it could potentially work that, this version of papyrus is just in a much, much worse headspace than Undertale papyrus.
Horror elements that are lying underneath Deltarune's main plot are coming to the surface the later we get into Deltarune's chapters, and papyrus coming out as the knight just wouldn't fit that at all.
You say that as you're playing TV Time, one of the most upbeat and honestly one of the best songs in the entire game.
Significantly more likely to me is that the imagery of bones and death are meant to let us know that the character who is inside the knight is either dying or already died and had to come back, which makes significantly more sense when we look at two of the major candidates for the knight, Rudy and Des. Des, who disappeared under unknown circumstances and is seemingly lost in the code of Deltarune, and Rudy, who is dying of some unknown sickness. So who do I think is the knight? I think it's Rudy.
What?
Oh, you're one of those.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Now, I know Des is the popular theory, but personally, it makes way more sense for Rudy to be working with his wife to bring about the roaring so that they can find Des deep in the dark world, rather than for Des's body and spirit to have been separated, with her spirit still in the code, but her body trying to find her. The knight seems far too sentient and aware to be just a body or just a vessel. It has personality vested in it. It's cocky. It taunts the protagonists. This fits way more with Rudy, which sounds like Rory, roaring knight, than with Des's corpse or body trying to somehow fight its way back to its soul? While that idea does
I mean, again, it's the whole, again, the reason I kind of like the whole multiple pieces of, Des is more, again, the stigmata, very similar to Gaster. What's the main thing we know about Gaster? He was scattered across time and space. I'm not saying that, the Knight is literally just Des's dead body that, the Dark Worlds have given life and stuff like that. No, for me, I'm very much under the opinion that it's a piece of Des. And because it's a piece, it's incomplete. What's a corpse? An incomplete person, stuff like that.
kind of fit in with the whole Chris Vessel conflict and parallels it in an interesting way. There just isn't enough evidence to show that that's the case for me. The only two options that make sense to me now are that Rudy and Carol are wombo-comboing their way to the Roaring, with Carol handling things in the light world and Rudy handling things in the dark world. Or that the Knight is a corpse/amalgam that Carol infused with some sort of power, possibly Chris's soul, which would explain why it has a personality that is extremely similar to Chris, but cockier and more violent. Either way, the characterizing elements of the Knight's design are so specific that when their identity is eventually revealed, I just know it's going to be satisfying and that it's going to pay off what this design sets up. Chapter 4! Hey, wait a minute, that's how many chapters there are in Deltarune!
Woo!
That would be clever if I didn't say it directly. Subtext! Deltarune is one of the few pieces of media today that does not commit the cardinal sin of making subtext direct and obvious. Deltarune's entire
That's part of the reason why it has such a thriving theorizing community, because we're all trying to figure out what it is.
story is about one's struggle with identity, so it makes perfect sense for our villain to not have one, or to have lost theirs. Deltarune doesn't need to throw a hammer in your face and say, "See, this is representative of Chris struggling with a non-binary identity." You can just kind of pick that up if you're paying attention to the signs. It's no secret that the Knight is an obvious parallel to Chris and seems to be their superior. Perhaps this is what Chris wants to become, or the ideal version of themselves that they have in their head right now. The fact that that ideal version of themselves is a literal shapeshifter is not imagery lost on me. But it
Literal shapeshifter. Okay, yeah, I didn't, okay, I've never seen that. Okay, yeah, I get it.
will be lost on a lot of people. There are plenty of people who have played
Like
through
what?
all 4 chapters of Deltarune and still refer to Chris as he. In every comment section, in every video on Deltarune, you will see this happen. But
I mean, I'll be completely honest. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm so deep into the Deltarune community, I'd probably be the same. Though honestly, like, I can see it where the fact that it's kind of like with Frisk, where like apart from Chris being human, their design is so like androgynous. You can easily see them as being either being biologically male or biologically female. Even I've honestly seen fan art, depicting them either way, and it looks perfect.
But Toby Fox doesn't try to cater to those people that aren't paying attention, and that's a good thing. If we take our media and we boil it down and make it as easily consumable as possible, we lose the nuance. We lose the depth. We lose everything that makes that media special. The Knight's greater ties to religious symbolism, to gender ideology, and to internal conflict of our main character all would not exist, or would be watered down to the point of not mattering if all of this stuff was just said outright. The Knight is the embodiment of darkness. The embodiment of having to interpret what is it that is waiting in the shadows. Much like Bibbin's painting Deimos, the villain of Deltarune's story is the negative space, the room for interpretation, the space for error, the fear of the unknown, and the question, of who you really are. The night is the dark side of interpretation. When your mind is racing, thinking about all of the possibilities. What could it be? What is it? What? Paranoia, anxiety, fear. The night is the horror of what could be lurking in the dark made manifest. The exact opposite of our protagonists manifesting their identities through bringing them to light. And that is what makes the Knight a perfect villain. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please comment, like, and subscribe to let the algorithm know that my videos are indeed worth watching, so that everybody around the world gets more Aleric videos. Yay! Woo!
Yeah, honestly, I mean, the first Aleric video I've ever watched, and it was honestly really nice. I really liked that. I'm definitely going to have to watch I'm guessing, the first video in this little series involving, you know, Chris and Susie and Rousey. I was going to say Azrael there. But yeah, that was really nice. And again, like, just so many things. Again, like the fact we're halfway through through Deltarune at this point, at least as far as we're aware. There's so many questions. I really do like. Honestly, I am going to miss this when the game is over. But I honestly still do just want some actual answers. But yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.